The Great Basin Desert in Nevada is a harsh, unforgiving place. But for the black-tailed jackrabbit, it is a perfect sanctuary. For decades, these desert hares have been the undisputed foundation of the local food web. They feed the coyotes. They feed the golden eagles. They are the beating pulse of this arid ecosystem. Until 3 years ago, populations didn't just dip, they completely plummeted. Across a 300-mile stretch of scrubland, the rabbits simply vanished. At first, state wildlife biologists assumed it was a severe drought year. Then they checked the remaining populations for hemorrhagic disease. But the testing labs came back completely clear. The rabbits weren't dying from sickness. Then, local ranchers started noticing something deeply unsettling. The natural predators, the coyotes and the hawks, were starving. Whatever was wiping out the rabbit population, it wasn't the usual suspects. The carcasses weren't being left behind to rot. They were being systematically dragged away. Lead field biologist Marcus Vance spent 6 months tracking the collapse. He set up 50 infrared trail cameras in the most isolated canyons of the state. He expected to document a migration shift. He expected to find localized starvation. Instead, the night footage revealed a very different kind of predator, an apex consumer that shouldn't be anywhere near this desert, and it is quietly eating its way through the ecosystem at an impossible rate. Marcus sat in the cab of his truck, the glow of his laptop illuminating his face against the desert blackness. He was reviewing the retrieved SD cards from the canyon cameras, but something was severely interfering with the files. Heavy digital artifacts tore across the screen. Whole segments of video were fractured by sudden static and pixelated distortion. Out of 50 cameras, 42 had completely malfunctioned, but camera 7, positioned near a dry riverbed, captured a clean 12 seconds of video. Marcus watched the footage, his hand freezing over the keyboard. At 2:14 a.m., the infrared sensor triggered. A massive thermal signature slid into the frame. It was low to the ground, moving with a heavy, deliberate rhythm. It was large enough to snap mature sagebrush like dry twigs, and it wasn't alone. Just at the edge of the lens, 3 more identical heat signatures moved into the canyon. They were moving in perfect synchronization, sweeping the terrain with military precision. Marcus grabbed his satellite phone and called the state wildlife director, an older veteran ranger named Thomas. He described the size of the thermal shapes, the way they moved, and the strange, heavy dragging tracks they left in the sand. The line went dead quiet. Thomas didn't ask to see the video. He didn't ask for a secondary location information. He simply told Marcus to start his truck, lock the doors, and drive straight to the regional office. Because Thomas had seen tracks exactly like this 5 years ago at a quarantine shipping facility, and he knew whatever was out there in the dark had no business breathing Nevada air. Marcus slammed his truck into gear and tore out of the dry riverbed. The drive back to the regional office took 2 agonizing hours in complete silence. When he finally arrived, Thomas was already waiting in the sterile glare of the briefing room. The veteran ranger had pulled up an archived incident report from a highway checkpoint raid in 2021. 5 years ago, authorities busted a massive exotic wildlife smuggling ring operating near the state line. They were moving hundreds of unregulated apex predators intended for private collectors. But the official confiscation inventory didn't match the reality on the ground. A secondary transport vehicle had been discovered abandoned on a remote dirt access road. By the time state troopers found it, the heavy metal transport crates in the back had been violently prized open. Thomas slid a faded evidence photograph across the steel table. It showed a massive, muscular reptile with thick, dark scales and a heavy, whip-like tail. A Nile Monitor, a highly intelligent, aggressive predator native to sub-Saharan Africa, capable of growing over 7 feet long. Marcus stared at the photograph, his jaw tight. These are tropical river predators, Marcus argued. They would freeze to death in a Nevada winter. Thomas leaned forward, pointing a thick finger at the thermal footage playing on the laptop. That's exactly what the federal wildlife